The Afghan sun hadn't risen yet, but the desert was already breathing heat. A soft wind carried the scent of dust, oil, and the faint metallic tang of anticipation. Beneath the shadow of a rusted Black Hawk, a team of Navy SEALs gathered in. Silence, checking weapons, tightening straps, and exchanging brief, wordless nods. They were professionals, the kind of men who didn't need speeches to prepare for war. But among them stood someone different. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, age 31, leaned against the landing gear, her rifle case beside her boots. The only woman on the team. The first female sniper ever to deploy with an active SEAL unit in combat. Her posture was calm, her focus absolute. The others called her Eagle Eye, a nickname that began as sarcasm but turned into respect after her first few missions. Her eyes, pale, sharp, and unblinking, scanned the horizon like a hawk. Even in stillness, she seemed ready to strike. Captain Reeves, the team leader, approached with a map in hand. "Mitchell," he said, his tone professional but laced. "With the kind of respect that's earned through fire, not words. You're our overwatch today. High Ridge south of the valley. We'll breach the compound at 0430. Sarah nodded once. "Copy that." Reeves studied her for a moment longer. "It's deep in Taliban territory. No air support until 0500. You'll be alone for the first stretch. You good with that?" A faint smile tugged at her lips. "I'm better alone." The captain grinned despite himself. "That's what I figured." The helicopter blades began to churn, throwing sand into the air. Sarah slipped her rifle case over her shoulder, a long, sleek M82 Barrett .50 caliber sniper rifle, customized to her preferences. She had named it Justice. As the team lifted off into the dark, Sarah watched the landscape unfurl beneath. Her boots, mountains carved like ancient scars, rivers like veins of silver, villages half buried in dust. Every hill could hide death. Every shadow could hold an ambush. Yet she wasn't afraid. Fear had long ago become just another part of the mission, like hunger, exhaustion, or the ache in her shoulder from years of carrying heavy rifles. She didn't eliminate fear. She mastered it. Sarah's journey to this moment had been anything but easy. She grew up in Montana, the daughter of a Marine sniper and a school teacher. Her father taught her how to shoot before she learned how to drive. Weekends were spent in the wilderness, tracking, stalking, learning how the wind carried scent and sound. Her father would whisper, "The rifle doesn't kill, the mind does. Control your breath, control your fear, control your world." When he died in a training accident overseas, Sarah was 17. The grief didn't break her. It forged her. She enlisted straight after college, first in the Navy, then through grueling years of special operations training. The instructors had laughed when she applied to sniper school. Not out of cruelty, out of disbelief. "You'll never make it," they said. She didn't argue. She didn't need to. Months later, she graduated top of her class, scoring perfect marks on endurance, precision, and tactical concealment. Her final test shot minus 1,200 meters, high crosswind, moving target, hit dead center. The laughter stopped that day. Now, as the helicopter descended near a rocky plateau overlooking the valley of Nad Ali, she was living the moment she'd trained her whole life for. The pilot gave her a thumbs up. "Drop zone clear." "Good hunting, Lieutenant." She jumped out, landing in a crouch as the rotors kicked up a storm of dust. The chopper lifted, leaving her alone in the still desert air. For the first time that morning, she exhaled deeply. Silence returned, thick, alive, and watchful. Sarah unpacked her rifle, laid out her gear with mechanical precision, and surveyed her surroundings. The ridge offered a perfect vantage point, elevation, cover, and a wide view of the valley. She set up her scope, adjusted for distance and wind speed, and began scanning. Her earpiece crackled softly. "Bravo team moving out," came Reeves's voice. Sarah replied, "Overwatch in position. You're clear to advance." "Roger that," eyes sharp, eagle eye. She smiled faintly at the call sign, then returned to her glass. Minutes turned into hours. The valley below lay silent, too silent. Through her scope, she watched her teammates move like shadows between dunes and ruins. Everything looked normal. Until it didn't. A flicker of movement caught her eye. Near a pile of rocks to the east, something small, quick, deliberate. A reflection, maybe a scope glint. She froze. "Bravo team, hold," she whispered. "Possible contact? 2 o'clock, 40 meters ahead of your lead." Reeves's voice came back steady. "Copy that? Visual confirmed?" She adjusted her scope. There a hint of cloth, a muzzle flash. "Contact confirmed." "Multiple tangos, East Ridge," she snapped. The first shot thundered from her rifle. The recoil kicked her shoulder like a hammer, but the target went down instantly. The sound echoed through the valley. Then the mountains came alive. Gunfire erupted from every direction. Dozens of enemy fighters poured from the cliffs, unleashing chaos. "Ambush! Take cover!" Reeves shouted. Sarah's pulse didn't rise. Her hands didn't shake. She moved from target to target, every shot deliberate, surgical. The .5 Ocal bullets tore through walls and armor like paper. For each round she fired, an insurgent fell. But for every one she dropped, 2 more appeared. "Mitchell, we're pinned." Reeves's voice crackled through static. "We need suppression." "On it," she replied, swinging her rifle toward a machine gun nest high on a ridge. Wind speed 12 knots. Distance 950 meters. Elevation 40 degrees. She adjusted 1 click up, 1 right, exhaled, and squeezed. The heavy gun exploded in a shower of sparks and dust. "Target neutralized," she said calmly. "Hell of a shot," Reeves muttered between bursts of gunfire. Sarah switched positions, rolling behind a boulder, just as a bullet struck where her head had been. She reloaded, checking her ammo. Half gone already. She needed to think fast. Her mind was a machine, analyzing angles, wind, and enemy movement. She wasn't just shooting, she was orchestrating the battlefield. Between volleys, she caught glimpses of her team huddled behind rocks, returning fire. The dust turned the air red. The smell of gunpowder was everywhere. "Bravo team, listen up," Reeves barked. "We're pulling back to Dust Ridge. Mitchell, cover our retreat." "Copy," she said. She pivoted to a new position, kneeling on the edge of a rock ledge. Through the scope, she saw an insurgent advancing on her wounded teammate, Petty Officer Diaz. No time to think. She fired. Diaz looked up, eyes wide, then gave a thumbs up. The sun finally began to rise, casting golden light over the chaos. The battlefield glowed in amber and fire. Sarah's hands were bleeding from the rifle's recoil, her shoulder bruised. Still, she didn't stop. She counted 15, 20, 30 confirmed hits, yet the enemy kept coming. She switched to her sidearm as a final wave of gunmen appeared. The sound of her shots echoed through the valley like a heartbeat refusing to quit. When the last body fell and the gunfire faded, the silence was heavier than before. Reeves's voice broke through the static. "Mitchell, you still up there?" Sarah looked around. Smoke, bodies, dust. Her breathing was steady. "Still here," she replied softly. "Still watching." And as the dawn painted the desert red, the legend of the lone operator was born. The night dissolved into a dim gray dawn as the SEAL team trudged through the narrow Afghan valley. The terrain looked lifeless, a maze of jagged ridges, scattered boulders, and dry stream beds that twisted like scars through the earth. Above them, the peaks loomed like silent sentinels. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, adjusted the scope slung over her shoulder, her eyes constantly sweeping the horizon. The valley floor stretched ahead like a throat, ready to swallow them whole. Every instinct in her body told her the place wasn't right. Captain Reeves led the column, raising his fist occasionally to signal a halt. His radio operator, Petty Officer Diaz, trudged behind him, antenna bouncing with each step. The men moved with quiet precision. No talking, no wasted motion. Their mission was simple on paper: infiltrate a Taliban compound hidden in the cliffs and retrieve intel on a weapons shipment. But Sarah knew that simple in war meant unpredictable. The cold morning air bit at their faces. Dust clung too. Their uniforms, mingling with the sweat already forming beneath their gear. Sarah glanced through her rifle scope occasionally, scanning the ridgelines for movement. Nothing. Just wind. Just silence. And that silence made her uneasy. "Eagle Eye, report," Reeves said over the comm. Sarah lifted her rifle, crouched low behind a rock, and peered through the magnified glass. Still clear. No thermal signatures. No movement at the compound. "Copy that," Reeves replied. "Let's keep it that way." They moved forward, spreading out in a tactical formation. The sound of boots on gravel was the only rhythm. Sarah followed near the rear, her senses alive. Years of training had honed her instincts beyond logic. The faint tremor in the ground, the shift in the wind, the way birds had gone quiet. Nature always knew before humans did. As they neared the mouth of the valley, she felt it, that gut-deep chill that whispered danger. She paused, kneeling, eyes darting across the rocks. Something metallic flashed for a heartbeat and vanished. "Captain," she whispered, "hold position." Reeves stopped mid-step. "What is it?" "I saw reflection. East Ridge. Could be glass, could be." The rest of her sentence was swallowed by the sound of static. The radio sputtered, crackled, then went dead. "Comms are jammed," Diaz muttered, tapping his headset. "Signal interference." Sarah's pulse quickened. Not good. She scanned again through her scope. Nothing. The mountains were quiet, too quiet. Reeves gave the silent hand signal. "Advance cautiously." Bettine moved again, slower this time, weapons raised. Sarah brought up the rear, her rifle sweeping side to side. A shadow flickered high above on the rocks. She froze, her breath stilled. Her scope found it, the faint outline of a human figure lying prone. Her blood turned cold. Contact. High ridge. The first shot cracked the air. Diaz dropped instantly, a burst of blood spraying across the dirt. "Ambush!" Reeves roared. Gunfire exploded from every direction, from the ridges, the cliffs, even behind boulders that moments ago had seemed harmless. Bullets screamed through the air, kicking up dirt and stone. The valley erupted in chaos. Sarah dove for cover, rolling behind a rock. Her rifle came up, scope locking onto movement. Through the lens, she saw them. Insurgents, dozens of them, moving like shadows across the cliffs. Her finger squeezed the trigger. Boom! The rifle thundered, echoing through the valley. The first target dropped. She shifted slightly, exhaled, and fired again. Another fell. But there were too many. "Bravo team, fall back." Reeves shouted. "Get to cover." The men scrambled behind rocks and ledges, returning fire as best they could. Bullets hissed and snapped around them like angry hornets. The air smelled of cordite and blood. Sarah crawled up to a higher ledge, giving herself a clearer angle. Her heart pounded in her ears, but her hands were steady as steel. She adjusted her scope, tracking a gunman setting up a machine gun on the ridge. She breathed out slowly, time slowing around her. Inhale, exhale, trigger squeeze. The enemy went limp before his finger even touched his weapon. "Target down," she whispered. Reeves's voice crackled faintly through intermittent static. Good shot, Eagle Eye. We're pinned, east and west flanks closing fast. Sarah's eyes darted. She could see at least 30 enemy fighters now, advancing through the valley's choke points. They were organized, disciplined, not random insurgents. This was a setup. Her stomach twisted. They knew we were coming, she muttered. Reeves ducked as bullets tore into the rock beside him. Doesn't matter now. We fight through. Sarah switched to semi-auto mode, firing quick, precise shots. Each bullet found its mark. Dust clouds rose with every impact. Her rifle sang the song of war, deep, rhythmic, merciless. Yet for every enemy she dropped, 2 more appeared. The ridge above her flashed with muzzle fire. Pebbles rained down around her. She felt the burn of a fragment slicing across her cheek, but she ignored it. Then, click, empty. She ducked low, ejecting the magazine, slamming in a fresh one. The enemy shouted in a language she couldn't understand, but she understood their meaning. Kill them all. A rocket-propelled grenade streaked across the valley, hitting near Reeves's position. The explosion threw men to the ground, shattering the air with fire and dust. Medic! Medic! Someone screamed. Sarah's chest tightened. She spotted. Reeves threw her scope, half buried under rubble, blood seeping through his sleeve. Captain's hit, she shouted. I'm covering. She adjusted her scope again. The gunman who'd fired the RPG was already reloading. Sarah's world narrowed to that one target. Her heartbeat faded. Her breath slowed. She fired. The man's body folded backward as the RPG slipped from his grasp and exploded mid-air. Reeves's voice came faint through the static. Still breathing. Keep firing. Always, she whispered. The battle raged for what felt like hours. The SEALs fought like wolves surrounded by a pack of lions. Every time the enemy gained ground, Sarah's rifle drove them back. Her teammates relied on her eyes, her precision, her unshakable calm. The radio crackled alive again for a brief second. Command to Bravo Team, status? Reeves gasped into his mic. Under heavy fire. Ambushed, multiple wounded. Request immediate air support. Static answered. Then silence. Sarah gritted her teeth. No backup. No air cover. No way out except through. Her mind raced. The valley was a kill zone. The high cliffs gave the enemy every advantage. They had to move now, before they were surrounded completely. Reeves, she called. We can't stay here. They're hurting us deeper in. We need high ground. The captain, blood on his face, nodded weakly. And we fight uphill. Sarah signaled to the others. Cover fire. The SEALs unleashed a barrage of bullets as she sprinted from her position, moving like a shadow between boulders. Her boots pounded the ground, her rifle slung tight across her chest. Bullets snapped past her ears, hitting rocks inches away. She slid behind a mound, rolled, and returned fire. Keep moving, Reeves shouted. To the ridge. The team began to climb, one by one, dragging the wounded with them. Sarah covered every step, firing at anything that moved below. Her world had shrunk to the rhythm of reloads, the thud of heartbeats, and the faint voice of Reeves over the radio. Finally, they reached a narrow ledge overlooking the valley. Smoke coiled upward like ghosts. Bodies littered the sand below, friend and foe alike. Sarah's breathing was ragged, but her mind was clear. She checked her ammo. 3 magazines left. Not enough. Reeves leaned against a rock, his arm bleeding, but his eyes alive. We're not done yet, Eagle Eye. Sarah met his gaze, her face streaked with blood and dust. Then we hold the ridge, she said firmly. She chambered another round, peered through her scope, and whispered to herself, Let them come. The valley below shimmered in the rising sun, a battlefield waiting for its next storm. And Sarah Mitchell, the lone sniper, was ready to meet it head-on. The valley had turned into a cauldron of smoke, blood, and dust. Every breath felt like swallowing fire. The SEALs had fought their way to the ridge, but the ambush was tightening like a noose. For every meter they gained, a dozen enemy rifles tracked them. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell crouched behind a boulder, her sniper rifle resting across her knees. Sweat trickled down her temple, carving clean lines through the dust on her face. Her ears rang from the endless gunfire, but her mind was sharp, focused, calculating, ruthless. Below her, the valley writhed with movement. Enemy fighters swarmed like ants across the sand, darting between rocks and burnt-out trucks. The numbers were staggering. They weren't facing a patrol. They were facing an army. She whispered into her cums, "Captain, we're boxed in. North Ridge has at least 50 hostiles. South Ridge another 20 closing fast." Reeves's voice came through, strained but steady. "Copy that. We hold this position. We can't go back. Too much open ground. We'll dig in here." Sarah adjusted her scope, eyeing the incoming fighters through the heat haze. Her hands were steady, her pulse strangely calm. One target at a time, she told herself. Her first shot split the morning air like thunder. A man on the ridge dropped, his rifle tumbling down the slope. Before the echo died, she'd already found her next target. Another shot. Another body. The enemy started to scatter, but she was faster. Through the scope, the world narrowed to breath, wind, and timing. Her bullets whispered death from almost a mile away. Each pull of the trigger was mechanical, an instinct honed by years of training. Yet behind every shot, there was emotion, controlled rage, focus, defiance. She wasn't just fighting for her life. She was fighting for the men below her brothers in arms, who refused to leave anyone behind. The ridge shuddered under the impact of mortar fire. Rocks exploded, showering her with shards. Sarah ducked, rolling to her left, then sprang up, rifle steady once more. "Mortar on the ridge!" She shouted. Diaz, barely conscious, groaned beside a pile of medical gear. Two SEALs worked frantically on another wounded teammate, applying tourniquets under fire. The smell of blood and cordite mixed into something nauseating. Reeves crawled toward her, clutching his rifle. His arm was bandaged, his face streaked with grime. Status? Ammo's good. Enemies regrouping. They're trying to flank west. Can you hold them off? Sarah's expression was stone. As long as I have bullets. Reeves managed a tight smile. That's all I needed to hear. A sudden explosion rocked the ridge. One of the SEALs was thrown backward, landing hard. Shouts filled the air. They're bringing RPGs. Sarah swung her rifle toward the far ridge, spotting a fighter loading another rocket launcher. She didn't hesitate. Inhale. Exhale. Squeeze. The shot connected. The man's body crumpled because the launcher detonated in a flash of orange. The explosion took two more with it. The others cheered, relief in their voices. But Sarah didn't stop to celebrate. She was already shifting, scanning for the next threat. Then she saw it. Movement near the valley floor. Trucks, 3 of them, each loaded with gunmen. Her stomach sank. Reeves, they're bringing reinforcements. 3 technicals, heavy guns mounted. Reeves swore under his breath. We can't hold against that. Command still dark? Comms are jammed. I'll try to burn through. Diaz croaked weakly, fiddling with the radio. Do it, Reeves barked. Everyone else, prepare for close contact. Sarah checked her magazine. 3 left. She reloaded and refocused. The trucks were closing fast, kicking up clouds of dust behind them. She aimed for the first gunner, steadying her breath. Exhale. Fire. The .50 cal round punched through the windshield, taking out both driver and gunner in one shot. The truck swerved violently, crashing into a rock and bursting into flames. "First truck down," she shouted. The second and third accelerated, gunners spraying wildfire toward the ridge. Bullets shattered rock inches from her head. She ducked, adrenaline surging. She could feel the concussive force of rounds hitting her cover. "Sarah," Reeves yelled. "Pull back." "Negative." She shouted back. "They'll mow you down if they reach the slope." She shifted position, crawling along the edge of the ridge to flank the truck's approach. She found a narrow crevice between two boulders, set up her bipod, and drew a bead on the next target. The second truck's gunner was spraying rounds chaotically. Sarah steadied her scope. The world went silent again. Wind direction, left to right, 15 miles per hour. Distance, 1,100 meters. Drop, 3 clicks high. She fired. The gunner's chest exploded. The truck jerked sideways and slammed into the third. Both vehicles spun out, rolling into the sand below. The explosion shook the entire valley. Flames roared. Reeves's voice came through, breathless. "That's 2 more down." "Nice shooting, Eagle Eye." Sarah didn't answer. Her focus was already elsewhere. New figures were emerging from the smoke, climbing toward the ridge. The next few minutes became a blur of chaos and precision. The insurgents closed in, shouting, firing from every angle. The SEALs fought back with rifles, grenades, and sheer grit. Sarah picked off anyone who got close. Her rifle was an extension of her body, her shots a rhythm of life and death. A bullet grazed her forearm, tearing through fabric and skin. Pain flared white-hot, but she ignored it. She shifted her grip, blood slicking the trigger guard. Her scope found a man tossing a grenade toward Reeves's position. She didn't think, she fired. The grenade exploded in midair, raining shrapnel back on the throwers group. "Nice one," someone yelled. "Focus." She barked back, voice hard. Her eyes darted to Diaz, who was still working the radio, sweat pouring down his face. "Command, this is Bravo Team. Requesting air support. Coordinates? Static. Nothing." Sarah looked toward the horizon. The rising sun painted the smoke in gold and crimson. The light was beautiful, in a cruel, haunting way. She whispered under her breath, "Come on, come on." Then, over the ridge, she spotted something that froze her blood. More fighters, at least 30, advancing in tight formation. They weren't chaotic like the rest. They moved with precision. Professional soldiers. Reinforcements. Sarah's heart pounded. They were completely surrounded now. "Captain," she said quietly, "they're closing in from the west. We're outnumbered 10-1. Reeves exhaled. "Then we make it hurt." Sarah nodded once. "Copy that." She crawled to a new vantage point higher up, her muscles burning. Every movement sent a jolt through her injured arm. She gritted her teeth and kept going. She found a narrow ledge overlooking the valley. Dangerous, exposed, but with a perfect line of sight. She settled in, adjusting her rifle. The wind howled past her ears. Dust stung her eyes. Her scope found the approaching line of fighters, moving fast. She began firing, one shot every 3 seconds. Each round hit true. Heads snapped back, bodies fell, and still they came. "Sarah," Reeves called. "We need to fall back." "Not yet," she shouted. "They're too close." Her last magazine clicked empty. She reached into her vest, pulled the final one free, slammed it in place. 30 rounds left. She whispered to herself, "Make them count." The enemy surged closer, bullets whizzing past her face. She took a breath and aimed again, This time, not at soldiers, but at the ridge itself. She fired at the unstable rock near the enemy's path. The bullet struck perfectly. A chunk of stone broke free, then another, then the entire slope gave way. The avalanche thundered down, burying half the advancing force beneath tons of rock and dust. The ground trembled under the force. Even the seals below stopped firing, staring in awe. Reeves looked up. "What the hell did you just do?" Sarah reloaded slowly, her face smeared with blood and grit. "Changed the odds." As the dust settled, the valley went eerily silent again. The bodies lay scattered, the sun climbing higher above the mountains. Sarah leaned back against the rock, chest heaving. Her shoulder ached from recoil. Her arm throbbed, while her eyes still burned with fierce light. Through the smoke, Reeves climbed toward her, limping but smiling weakly. "You just saved all our asses." She met his gaze, her voice calm and low. "We're not done yet, Captain. They'll be back." He nodded. "Then we'll be ready." Sarah turned her gaze back toward the distant horizon, where faint black dots moved in the rising heat. Enemy reinforcements. More trouble. She chambered another round, exhaled, and whispered to herself, "Let them come." And the desert waited for the next battle to begin. The desert had gone too quiet. Smoke from the collapsed ridge still curled into the pale morning sky, a dark reminder of how close the seals had come to being wiped out. The air reeked of burning diesel, blood, and scorched sand. Lieutenant Sarah Michel crouched beside the ridge's edge, her sniper rifle laid across her lap. Her hands trembled slightly now that the adrenaline had faded. The valley below was littered with wreckage trucks, bodies, spent casings, glinting like scattered coins in the sun. Captain Reeves limped toward her, one hand pressed to a bleeding wound in his side. "Status?" he rasped. "Minimal ammo, 2 critical injuries, no comes," Sarah replied, her tone clipped but steady. "We need medevac, air support, or both." Reeves gave a weak laugh that turned into a cough. "You make it sound easy." She looked at him, concern flickering behind her steely eyes. "You need morphine, sir." He shook his head. "Save it. I've had worse." But the way he swayed on his feet told another story. Sarah caught him as he stumbled, easing him down against a rock. "You're not fooling anyone," she said quietly. Reeves managed a grin. "Who's going to take command then? You?" Sarah met his eyes and for the first time didn't look away. "If I have to." Reeves chuckled faintly. "Then don't screw it up." By noon, the sun was an unrelenting hammer beating down on the wounded team. The heat shimmered across the landscape, turning every shape into a mirage. Diaz finally managed to get a weak radio signal through, just long enough to send coordinates before the static swallowed his voice again. There was no confirmation, no promise of help. "Could be an hour," he said, slumping back, exhausted. "Could be never." Sarah nodded grimly. "Then we hold for as long as it takes." She climbed back to her overwatch perch, the sniper rifle feeling heavier than ever. Each movement made her wounded arm scream, but she ignored it. She'd learned long ago that pain was just another battlefield companion loud, persistent, but manageable. Through her scope, she scanned the horizon. The desert stretched endlessly, flat and merciless. Yet somewhere out there, she knew the enemy was regrouping. The first sign came as a faint shimmer of dust, tiny at first, then growing. "Contact," she said into her gums. "Direction?" Reeves asked weakly. "Northwest, 2 clicks. Looks like multiple vehicles. Maybe 20 men." No one cursed. They didn't have the energy left. They just moved, quietly, efficiently. Positions were adjusted, magazines checked, grenades placed. Sarah felt the weight of command settle over her shoulders. Reeves could barely move now. The others were looking to her. She hadn't asked for this. But leadership rarely waited for permission. It demanded presence. And right now, she was all they had. She set up her sniper rifle again, aligning the barrel with a distant glint of metal. She counted trucks. 3 of them, maybe 4, approaching fast. "Everyone hold fire," she ordered. "We wait until they're close enough." Her voice was too calm, even for her. Inside, her mind was racing through scenarios, calculating every possible angle of defense. The sound of engines grew louder, rumbling across the sand. The SEALs tensed. At 800 meters, she fired. The first round tore through the lead truck's windshield, killing the driver instantly. The vehicle veered sideways, slamming into the second. Chaos erupted. "Now!" Sarah shouted. Gunfire exploded from the ridge. The SEALs unleashed everything they had left. Bullets rained down on the approaching convoy, and the desert lit up with muzzle flashes. Sarah's rifle cracked again and again, each shot precise, deliberate, final. But for every enemy that fell, 2 more seemed to rise. The air thickened with dust and screams. Reeves tried to push himself upright to return fire, but Sarah caught him with one hand. "You're done, Captain," she said firmly. "You'll get us all killed if you bleed out." He gritted his teeth. "Then make it count." An explosion rocked the Ridge RPG. The blast threw Sarah backward, her ears ringing, sand filling her mouth. She rolled over, coughing, blinking through the haze. A section of the ridge was on fire. The blast had torn through their ammo stash. Flames licked upward, smoke curling black against the sun. Diaz screamed for help. He was pinned under debris. Sarah sprinted toward him, ignoring the sniper fire snapping around her. She shoved aside rocks, pulled him free, dragging him behind cover. "You good?" she shouted. He coughed, blood dripping from his lip. "Still alive. That's good enough." She turned back toward the ridge. The fire was spreading fast. "Ramirez, get those flames under control before the ammo cooks off." Ramirez, burned and limping, didn't hesitate. He and another SEAL grabbed sandbags and started throwing them over the flames. It was madness, pure chaos, but it was organized chaos, and it was hers to command. Sarah returned to her position, breathing hard. She peered through her scope again, and her stomach dropped. The enemy had adapted. They were flanking from both sides now, moving low, using the smoke as cover. She switched to her sidearm, firing at shapes darting through the haze. Bullets whizzed past her ears. A round struck the rock beside her, showering her with fragments. Reeves's voice came through the comms, weak but resolute. "Pull back to secondary position." "Negative," Sarah said, voice like steel. "If we retreat now, they'll overrun us before we can regroup." "Mitchell, I'm not asking permission, sir." For a long second, silence filled the channel. Then Reeves chuckled faintly. "That's my girl. Do what you do best." Sarah steadied her breath and switched back to her rifle. She had 8 rounds left. 8 lives to end before they reached her men. The world narrowed again, just her and the scope. A figure appeared in the smoke. She fired. 1 down. Another silhouette, 2 quick bursts. 2 more. Her shoulder burned from recoil, but she kept going. Each kill was mechanical, efficient. 7, 8, 9, 10. The line thinned, the advance slowed. The remaining insurgents hesitated, confused. They hadn't expected this kind of resistance from a team that should have been dead hours ago. Sarah used that hesitation like a blade. She fired again, taking out their leader, the man with the radio. The effect was instant. The rest broke formation, retreating into the desert, dragging their wounded. The silence that followed felt unreal. Sarah lowered her rifle slowly, her breathing ragged. Around her, the seals began to emerge from cover, dazed but alive. Reeves leaned against a rock, smiling faintly through the pain. "You did it," he murmured. Sarah shook her head. "No, they'll be back." He gave a weak laugh. "Then we'll be ready." She stared out over the desert, the setting sun casting long shadows across the battlefield. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to feel fear, exhaustion, sorrow. Dozens of men lay dead below, victims of her precision. The weight of that reality pressed down on her chest. War had no glory, just survival. But beneath the heaviness, something else stirred a vow, unspoken but burning in her heart. She would get her team home, no matter the cost. That night, as the desert wind howled around their battered camp, Sarah sat awake by the fire, cleaning her rifle. The stars above were cold and distant, like the eyes of ghosts watching from heaven. Reeves slept beside the wounded, his face pale. Diaz mumbled in his sleep. Ramirez stared silently into the flames. Sarah worked in silence, her hands methodical, movements precise. When she finally looked up, her reflection in the rifle's metal was that of a soldier transformed harder, colder, but unbroken. She whispered to herself, "You'll bring them home, Michel. Every last one." And with that vow, she chambered a fresh round, eyes fixed on the horizon where tomorrow's battle would surely come. Darkness fell over the desert like a shroud. The last embers of daylight bled away behind the jagged ridge, leaving only a silver-blue wash of moonlight and the restless whisper of the wind. Every sound seemed sharper now, the rasp of deer straps, the dry rattle of loose stones under boots, the distant bark of a jackal somewhere beyond the dunes. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell crouched near a dying fire, checking her rifle one final time. The weapon felt almost alive in her hands, its metal warm from hours of use. Across the small camp, the remaining SEALs moved in practiced silence, faces smeared with soot, eyes hollow from exhaustion. There were 6 of them still capable of fighting. 6 against who knew how many. Captain Reeves slept fitfully under a thermal blanket, his breathing shallow. The med kit's last dose of morphine was gone. Diaz and Ramirez had argued about rationing it, but in the end, Sarah's word was final. Reeves needed it more than anyone else, if only to keep him quiet enough to rest. Now, as the wind shifted, Sarah felt the faint tremor of engines in the distance. Not close, not yet, but coming. Reinforcements. The enemy would be back before dawn. They didn't have time to wait for rescue that might never come. She looked around at her men. "We move out in 10, she said softly. "Objective is to disrupt their reinforcements before they reach the ridge. We hit them hard and disappear before they know what happened." Ramirez frowned. "You're talking about taking the fight to them?" Sarah nodded. "They think we're cornered. Let's make them bleed for thinking that." No one objected. They were past fear now. Only purpose remained. They left. The wounded and Captain Reeves hidden in a shallow cave at the base of the ridge, wrapped in thermal blankets and camo netting. Sarah lingered a moment before leaving, her hand brushing Reeves's shoulder. "I'll bring them back," she whispered. "All of us?" He stirred faintly, eyes half open. "Make it count, Mitchell." "I will." Then she was gone, slipping into the darkness, like a shadow among ghosts. The night air was freezing. Every breath misted before her face. The moon hung low and bright, turning the dunes into waves of pale silver. The team moved in a staggered line, using the ridges for cover, every step calculated. Sarah led them through a narrow ravine choked with rock and scrub. Ahead, through her night vision scope, she could see the enemy convoy, a dozen men setting up an encampment near the dried riverbed, trucks parked in a semicircle, machine guns mounted and ready. They were laughing, smoking, confident. They had no idea what waited in the dark beyond their fires. Sarah crouched behind a boulder and whispered, "Positions. Diaz, you circle west. Ramirez, you and Nolan hit the fuel truck first. On my mark." The men moved like ghosts. Seconds stretched. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Then click. A pebble slipped under someone's boot. One of the enemy guards froze, his head snapping toward the sound. He started to speak, but Sarah's suppressor whispered once. The man collapsed silently into the dust. "Go," she breathed. The SEALs erupted from the darkness with deadly precision. Silenced rifles coughed in rapid bursts. The first truck went up in flames, a flower of orange light blooming against the night. Shouts and gunfire filled the air. Sarah dropped to one knee, firing steadily into the chaos. Each shot was measured. Each target fell before they could even turn their guns. Diaz lobbed a grenade toward the far side of the camp. The explosion shattered the stillness, throwing silhouettes into the firelight. The enemy's return fire was wild, panicked. Bullets tore through tents, ricocheting off rocks. "Ramirez!" "Right flank," Sarah shouted. "I'm on it." He moved like a wraith, firing short, controlled bursts. The enemy line broke apart under the assault. But victory in the desert never came clean. A rocket streaked out of the smoke, slamming into the ridge above them. The blast showered the SEALs with stone and sand. Sarah hit the ground hard, ears ringing, the taste of blood sharp in her mouth. She rolled over, coughing, and saw one of her men lying still, Nolan, the youngest of the squad. His eyes stared blankly at the stars. For a heartbeat, time froze, and rage burned through her chest. She grabbed her rifle, rose to one knee, and fired without hesitation. 3 shots, 3 kills. Her movements were fluid, merciless. "Fall back," she shouted. "Mission complete, get clear before they regroup." The SEALs sprinted for the ravine as another explosion ripped through the enemy camp. The fuel truck went up again, sending a column of fire into the sky. Heat seared Sarah's back as she ran, bullets whistling past. They dove behind rocks, gasping for air, hearts pounding. The desert around them glowed faintly with reflected firelight. Diaz laughed breathlessly. "You said make them bleed, mission accomplished." Sarah didn't answer. She stared back, toward the inferno, where the outlines of running men flickered in the flames. The ambush had worked, but the cost gnawed at her. Nolan was gone, another name for the list she carried in her heart. By the time they returned to the cave, the first hint of dawn was creeping over the horizon. The sky was streaked with crimson, the color of blood and survival. Reeves stirred as they entered. "Report," he muttered. "Convoy destroyed," Sarah said quietly. "Reinforcements delayed. But we lost Nolan." Reeves closed his eyes. "He was a good man. He died buying us time," she said. "We use it well." Diaz checked the radio again. Still no response, but I think the signal's clearing up. "We might get through once the sun's higher," Sarah nodded. "Then we hold till extraction." They fortified the cave entrance with debris and broken gear. Sarah set her rifle on a tripod, scanning the dunes through the scope. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving behind exhaustion and a dull ache in her wounded arm. Ramirez came to sit beside her, offering a canteen. "You ever stop moving, Lieutenant?" "Only when the job's done." He smiled faintly. "You remind me of Reeves when he was younger. Scary focus." She didn't smile back. "Focus keeps people alive." Ramirez looked toward the sunrise. "And kills a part of you every time." Sarah said nothing. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the wind. By mid-morning, Diaz's voice broke the stillness. "I got something. Command's frequency weak but clear." Everyone froze. Sarah rushed over, grabbing the headset. "This is Bravo Team, requesting immediate extraction. Grid Delta 69. Multiple casualties. Limited ammo. A burst of static, then copy. Bravo team. Extraction en route. ETA 90 minutes. Hold position. Sarah exhaled for the first time in hours. Copy that. We'll be ready. Reeves smiled weakly. You did it, Mitchell. She shook her head. Not yet. 90 minutes is a long time. And it was. As the minutes dragged on, Sarah watched the horizon through her scope. Heat rippled across the sand, distorting the distance. Every flicker of movement set her nerves on edge. The enemy wouldn't stay broken for long. Sure enough, just as the clock neared an hour, she spotted them figures on foot, moving low, maybe 30 in all. They were coming straight for the ridge. Contact, she said quietly. They're coming. Reeves tried to sit up, grimacing. Hold them till the birds arrive. Sarah adjusted her rifle, chambered a round, and gave a faint, fierce smile. Yes, sir. The desert wind whipped across her face, carrying the faint scent of smoke and death. The hunt wasn't over. It was simply changing hands. Tonight, she'd been the predator. Now, as dawn broke over the battlefield, she prepared to become it again. She pressed her cheek to the rifle, steadied her breath, and whispered the words that had become her creed. Not one step closer. Then she pulled the trigger, and the war began anew. The morning sun burned through the haze, turning the dunes into a sea of molten gold. Heat shimmered across the valley, blurring the shapes of the dead trucks still smoking in the distance. Every inch of ground around the ridge carried the ghosts of the night before spent brass, blackened sand, the acrid smell of diesel and blood. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell lay prone at the cave's entrance, cheek pressed to the cool metal of her rifle. Through her scope, she counted shapes crawling over the horizon. 30, maybe more. The enemy was regrouping, marching steadily toward them. Behind her, the wounded stirred. Captain Reeves was pale but awake, his bandaged side seeping dark red through the gauze. Diaz crouched beside the radio, whispering to the static. Any word from extraction? Sarah asked, without taking her eye from the scope. Birds are inbound, Diaz replied. They're 15 minutes out. But they've got to land 3 clicks east too hot here. Sarah's stomach tightened. So we hold the ridge until then. Ramirez gave a weary laugh. We've been holding since yesterday. What's another 15 minutes? She didn't answer. She knew what 15 minutes meant in a fight like this. A lifetime or a death sentence. The first gunfire cracked across the sand, distant but deliberate. Sarah's rifle barked in reply. The first target dropped. Then another. The enemy didn't stop. They moved like a tide, fanning out, using the dunes for cover. Diaz lay down, suppressing fire. She shouted. Ramirez, left flank, watch the rocks. The SEALs answered without hesitation. Bullets ripped into the sand, kicking up clouds of dust. The air filled with the dry staccato of rifle fire. Sarah shifted positions, cycling her bolt, adjusting for wind. Every shot she fired bought them seconds. Seconds for the wounded to breathe. Seconds closer to rescue. Her radio crackled suddenly. Bravo team, this is Falcon 1. We have you on thermal. Mark your position with smoke. Diaz grabbed a flare, popped the cap, and hurled it into the open. A column of red smoke curled skyward. Copy, Falcon 1, Sarah said. We're pinned heavy contact, north and west. You'll need to clear the landing zone. Roger that, the pilot answered. ETA 10 mics. 10 minutes. Sarah reloaded and whispered, then we fight for 10. The next wave hit harder. Machine guns chattered from the ridgeline opposite. Bullets sparked off the rocks around the cave. Shards of stone sliced across Sarah's cheek, drawing a thin line of blood. She barely felt it. Ramirez screamed over the gunfire, They're pushing left. I see them. She yelled back. She swung her rifle toward the advancing line. One shot, two, three. The front line staggered, fell. Then came the crack of an RPG launch. Down, Sarah shouted. The missile slammed into the slope above them, blasting rocks and sand in every direction. The concussion threw her backward. For a moment, everything went white, the roar, the heat, the choking dust. When her vision cleared, she saw Ramirez lying still, blood pooling beneath him. Ramirez. She crawled to him, shaking his shoulder. No response. His eyes stared past her, fixed on the endless sky. Her throat tightened, but she forced it down. Diaz, cover me. I'm on it. Sarah turned back to her rifle. The grief, the exhaustion, all of it became fuel. Her hands were steady, her breathing measured. She picked her targets with deadly calm. A valley filled with echoes of her vengeance. Minutes blurred into eternity. The radio crackled again. Falcon 1 to Bravo team. 2 out of 3 helos are taking fire. We'll cover you for extraction, but you need to move now. Reeves tried to rise, grimacing with pain. Go, he rasped. Take the others and move. I'm not leaving you, Sarah said flatly. That's an order, Lieutenant. She shook her head. Then consider me insubordinate. He glared at her for a moment, then gave a faint, defeated smile. You always were. Sarah called out, Diaz, help me get the wounded ready. The team moved quickly, loading gear into packs, checking weapons one last time. Outside, the gunfire grew closer, echoes bouncing off the ridge like thunder. The enemy was within 100 yards now. Sarah slung her rifle and grabbed Reeves under one arm. We're moving east. Stay low and don't stop. They slipped from the cave, darting between rocks, bullets snapping past like angry hornets. Dust exploded around their boots. Behind them, the ridge burned. Ahead, across the shimmering desert, the faint thump of helicopter rotors grew louder. Hope sounded like that steel wings cutting through the air. But Hope was still 3 kilometers away. Halfway down the slope, they hit open ground. Sarah's heart slammed in her chest. Smoke grenades now. Diaz hurled 2 canisters. White plumes blossomed, cloaking their movement. They ran through the haze, dragging Reeves, firing blind to keep the enemy back. Through the smoke, shapes emerged, dark figures sprinting after them. Gunfire erupted again. Sarah dropped to one knee, spun, and fired. One enemy went down. Another stumbled, screaming. Diaz covered her, his rifle spitting flame until the bolt locked back on empty. Out of ammo, he shouted. Keep moving. They ran until their lungs burned, every step a battle of will. The smoke began to thin. The ground leveled into the flat riverbed that served as the makeshift landing zone. Overhead, the shadow of the helicopter loomed, Falcon 1, its rotors churning the sand into a storm. The side gunner leaned out, opening fire on the pursuing insurgents. Go! Go! Someone screamed from the helo. Sarah waved Diaz forward with Reeves. Get him on board. What about you? Diaz yelled. I'll cover the rear. The final stretch felt endless. Enemy rounds tore through the air, ripping holes through the smoke and dust. Sarah dropped prone, reloaded her last magazine, and sighted in. Her scope found them 5 men closing fast. She fired. 1 down. 2, 3. The 4th got close enough that she could see his eyes. She fired again, the recoil jolting through her battered shoulder. He fell backward into the sand. The last one hesitated, ducking behind a dune. Sarah waited, heartbeat steady. When his head appeared, she squeezed the trigger. Silence followed. She rose, chest heaving, and sprinted toward the helicopter. Diaz reached out a hand, pulling her up as the rotors howled. Everyone aboard. The crew chief shouted. Negative? Sarah turned toward the ridge. We still have eyes on movement, north side enemy reinforcements. They'll shoot you down if you lift off now. The pilot's voice cut through the intercom. We can't stay here. Sarah met Reeves's gaze. He knew what she was thinking before she said it. Don't you dare, he whispered. She smiled sadly. Somebody has to buy you those extra seconds. He tried to grab her wrist, but she slipped free, leaping from the helo back into the dust. Mitchell! He roared, but his voice was lost in the wind. She hit the ground running, dove behind a dune, and set up her rifle once more. The helicopter's rotors whipped the sand into a furious storm behind her. She could barely see, but her instincts didn't need sight anymore. The enemy was coming fast. She could hear them shouting. She took aim, her scope flickering with dust and sunlight. 1 shot. 2. Every bullet counted. The helo lifted slowly, engines straining. Sarah's shots drew the enemy's attention away from it, their rounds hammering her position instead. The ground exploded around her, sand biting into her skin. She reloaded, fired again. Her body screamed for rest. Her vision blurred. But she stayed. Through the haze, she saw the helicopter rising higher, banking east safe. She smiled faintly. Then a sharp impact hit her shoulder. The world spun. She fell back into the sand, rifle slipping from her grasp. Above her, the sun blazed white against the sky. The rotor thump faded into distance. She heard only the wind, now soft, endless. She reached out weakly, fingertips brushing the rifle's barrel. Her lips moved, barely a whisper. For the team. And the desert swallowed the sound. The rotors thundered against the dawn sky as Falcon 1 tore eastward, carrying what remained of Bravo team. Inside the cabin, sand whipped through the open doors, stinging faces, encoding every surface in dust. The medic knelt over Captain Reeves, pressing fresh gauze against his wound. Diaz sat hunched nearby, hands trembling as he stared at the open bay door, the desert shrinking below them. Where's Sarah? He shouted over the roar. No one answered. Reeves tried to push himself up, grimacing. She jumped back, he rasped. She stayed behind to cover us. The medic shot him a glare. Then we have to go back. Diaz yelled. Negative, the pilot's voice crackled through the headset. We're taking heavy ground fire. We pull another pass, we all die. Diaz slammed his fist against the metal floor. We can't just leave her. Reeves' face hardened. We won't. He turned to the pilot. Get us to base. As soon as we rearm, we go back. The pilot hesitated. Sir, command's gonna ground you for that. Reeves' tone was ice. Then they can court-martial me later. Hours later, the helicopter touched down at a forward operating base, a cluster of tents and hangars crouched beneath the blazing sun. Reeves was carried to the medic tent, but his protests filled the air. I'm not out. Patch me up, that's an order. Diaz didn't wait for clearance. He was already refueling, checking weapons, and shouting at the crew chief for ammo. Every minute felt like betrayal. Somewhere out there, Sarah was still in the open, wounded or worse. By the time they lifted off again, the desert was swallowing the afternoon light. Shadows stretched long and thin across the dunes. Falcon 2, this is Bravo team, Diaz said into his headset. We're going back to Grid 9-2. She's still out there. Roger that, the pilot replied quietly. Let's bring her home. When they reached the ridge, the silence was unbearable. Smoke still coiled from burned-out vehicles. The wind hissed softly through the rocks, carrying the faint scent of cordite and death. They circled once, twice searching. "Nothing on thermal," the co-pilot murmured. "Drop us," Reeves ordered. "We'll sweep on foot." The chopper descended, kicking up waves of dust. Reeves and Diaz disembarked, weapons ready, eyes scanning every rock and shadow. The battlefield looked frozen in time. Bullet casings glittered in the sand like tiny mirrors. Blood darkened the stones near the cave entrance. Then Diaz saw the rifle. Lying half buried in the sand, its barrel scorched, its scope cracked. Sarah's rifle. He dropped to his knees, brushing away the dust. The name Mitchell was etched into the stock. His throat closed up. No, she's got to be close. Reeves crouched beside him. Look around. She wouldn't leave that rifle unless she had to. They fanned out, combing the ridge. Tracks led down the slope, toward the open flats where Sarah had made her last stand. Small footprints. Drag marks. Drops of blood turning brown under the sun. "Over here," Diaz called. Reeves followed, his breath catching. There, against a dune, half covered by drifting sand, lay Sarah Mitchell. Her uniform was torn, her face streaked with dirt and blood. The desert wind tugged gently at her hair. Diaz dropped beside her, hands shaking as he pressed his fingers to her neck. She's got a pulse." Reeves exhaled sharply. "Call Falcon 2, tell them we've got her alive." Diaz's voice cracked over the radio. "She's alive." "Repeat, she's alive." The helicopter swooped low, medics sprinting out with a stretcher. They worked quickly, stabilizing her, wrapping her in blankets, checking her vitals. Sarah stirred faintly, her lips moving. Reeves leaned close. "You're safe now, Lieutenant. We've got you." Her eyelids fluttered. Did they make it out?" He smiled through the dust and pain. "You saved us all." A weak smile touched her lips before she slipped into unconsciousness. Back at base, word spread fast: the sniper who refused to die, the woman who held off dozens to save her team. The soldiers called her the Desert Angel. For days, Sarah drifted between sleep and wakefulness in the field hospital. The nurses whispered her name like a legend. Command officers came and went, asking questions, taking notes, but none could hide the awe in their eyes. When she finally woke fully, Reeves was there, leaning on a crutch but alive. "Morning, soldier," he said quietly. "Welcome back." Sarah blinked, disoriented. "How long?" 3 days, he replied. "You lost a lot of blood. They thought you wouldn't make it." She tried to sit up, wincing. "Guess they underestimated me." He chuckled softly. "They usually do." Her gaze drifted to the window. Beyond the canvas flaps, the sun set over the desert she'd nearly died in. "What about Ramirez?" she asked. Reeves' expression faltered. "We buried him at dawn. Full honors." Sarah nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "He'd like that." They sat in silence for a moment before Reeves spoke again. "Command wants to give you the Silver Star. Maybe more. You saved all of us." Sarah looked away. "I didn't do it for medals." "I know," he said softly. "But people need to remember what courage looks like." A week later, she stood on the runway beside her team, what was left of it. Diaz handed her something wrapped in cloth. "Figured this belonged to you," he said. She unwrapped it, her rifle, cleaned and repaired. The metal gleamed in the sunlight. Her name was still carved into the stock, the letters filled with sand. "I thought I lost this," she murmured. Diaz smiled faintly. "You did. But the desert gave it back." She ran her fingers over the engraving. "Then maybe it's not done yet." Reeves approached, his posture stiff from his healing wounds. "You sure you're ready to go home?" he asked. Sarah watched the horizon, the endless expanse of golden dunes. Home, she repeated softly. Yeah, I think I'm ready. But in her heart, she knew part of her would always remain here on this ridge, beneath this sun, where death had come close enough to whisper her name. Back in the States, her story spread like wildfire. News anchors spoke her name with reverence. Veterans wrote letters. Children sent drawings of a lone sniper standing against an army. She hated the attention at first, but she also understood it wasn't really about her. It was about what people needed to believe in. Courage, loyalty, sacrifice. At a small ceremony in Virginia, she stood before a sea of uniforms as the general pinned the medal to her chest. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled, but all she saw was the faces of her team, Reeves, Diaz, Ramirez. Her family. The general saluted. Lieutenant Mitchell, for acts of gallantry under fire, above and beyond the call of duty, America thanks you. She saluted back, voice steady. Just doing my job, sir. But as the applause swelled, she felt something deeper, a quiet pride, not in survival, but in standing her ground when everything else fell apart. That night, she sat alone on her porch, the medal lying on the table beside her. The air was still, the crickets soft. She looked up at the stars, countless and distant. In the faint wind, she could almost hear the desert again, the echo of gunfire, the whisper of sand sliding over stone, the steady heartbeat of survival. She smiled faintly. We made it, she whispered to the night. All of us? And somewhere, far across the ocean, the wind moved gently over the ridge where she once lay, carrying with it the legend of the Desert Angel, the sniper who fought alone so others could live. 2 years had passed since the ambush in the Afghan desert, yet for Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, every sunrise still carried the color of that sand, blinding, gold, and haunted. The world had moved on, but her memories hadn't. The battle, the faces, the last words whispered over static-filled radios. They lingered like shadows she couldn't outpace. She had returned to Virginia Beach, back to the quiet streets and ocean air of home. But the sound of waves breaking at night often turned into the echo of rotor blades in her dreams. Some nights she woke drenched in sweat, her hands reaching instinctively for a rifle that wasn't there. Even so, she found purpose in the silence. She began training new recruits at the SEAL Sniper School, teaching them what no textbook could, how to survive not just the battle, but the guilt that followed. The recruits called her ma'am, with a mix of fear and reverence. To them, she wasn't just a soldier, she was a living legend. Her story had become a fixture in military briefings, whispered across bases like a war hymn. The lone sniper who had stood her ground while outnumbered 30-1. But Sarah hated the word legend. Legends were stories. What happened out there had been painfully, brutally real. Still, when she looked at those young faces full of nerves, determination, and naive faith, she realized why the legend mattered. It wasn't about glorifying war. It was about teaching courage, the kind born not from fearlessness, but from devotion. During one of her training sessions, she knelt beside a young trainee struggling with his aim. Breathe through your shot, she told him softly. Not before, not after. In the middle, let the world go quiet. He adjusted, fired bullseye. He turned to her, grinning. Like that, Mom? She smiled faintly. Exactly like that. And for a fleeting second, she saw a reflection of herself years ago, before the ambush, before the scars. Later that evening, she sat in her office, a worn photograph resting on her desk. Bravo team, all 6 of them, smiling under the Afghan sun before their last mission. Reeves with his crooked grin, Ramirez holding up a peace sign, Diaz pretending to look serious. She traced her thumb over their faces. Reeves was now stationed in D.C., serving as an instructor at the Naval Academy. Diaz had retired early, working with veteran outreach programs. Ramirez, she paused, letting the silence honor him. A knock broke her thoughts. "Come in," she said. The door opened to reveal a young journalist, probably no older than 25, holding a recorder nervously. "Lieutenant Mitchell? Sorry to disturb you. I'm from Stars and Stripes. I was hoping to talk about the Battle of Helmand Ridge, your story." Sarah leaned back. "My story?" He nodded eagerly. "Yes, ma'am. The Navy's releasing a documentary, Unsung Heroes. They said you were the anchor of it. People want to hear what really happened." Her jaw tightened. "What really happened isn't easy to hear." He hesitated. "That's why they should." Sarah studied him for a moment, then sighed. "All right. Sit down." The interview lasted hours. She spoke slowly, carefully, not glorifying, not dramatizing. She described the fear, the decisions, the sounds that still echoed. The journalist listened, wide-eyed, occasionally glancing at the recorder, as though afraid it might stop working. When she finished, he asked quietly, "What was going through your mind when you stayed behind?" She looked out the window, watching the waves roll in. "It wasn't heroism," she said finally. "It was instinct. Someone had to stay. I wasn't ready to watch my team die." He scribbled furiously, then asked, "Do you regret it?" Sarah thought for a long time. "No," she said. "But I remember every face I took down. Every sound. People think courage feels clean. It doesn't. It burns." When the interview ended, the journalist shook her hand with both of his. "Thank you for your honesty, ma'am." She gave a small nod. "Just make sure they tell it right." Months later, when the documentary aired, the country watched in silence. The footage of the ridge, the recovered radio calls, the interviews with Reeves and Diaz, it all painted a picture of sacrifice and grit that brought veterans and civilians alike to tears. The final scene showed Sarah sitting on a dune, rifle slung across her shoulder, the wind tugging at her hair. Her voice echoed through the narration. Sometimes bravery isn't charging forward. Sometimes it's standing your ground when every instinct tells you to run. The image froze there, framed by the sunset. Across America, millions of viewers saw not just a soldier, but a symbol of endurance. After the film, Sarah received hundreds of letters. Children wrote that they wanted to be strong like her. Wives of soldiers thanked her for bringing their husbands home. Veterans said her story helped them find peace with their own memories. She read every letter, one by one, late at night when the house was quiet. Some made her cry. Others made her smile. But all of them reminded her that what she had endured hadn't been for nothing. One letter, however, stood out. It was from the sister of a fallen enemy combatant. "My brother died in that battle. He was young, just 21. He believed in something he didn't understand. I wanted you to know that I don't hate you. War takes from all of us. But your courage gives me hope that someday there won't be need for it." Sarah read it 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and placed it beside the photo of Bravo Team. Years passed. The medals gathered dust in a drawer. The scars faded, but never disappeared. Yet the legend grew. The story of the sniper who saved her team became part of SEAL training curriculum, a study in courage, precision, and sacrifice. At memorial events, her name was spoken alongside the greats, Murphy, Dietz, and now Mitchell. But she always stood quietly in the back, watching the new recruits salute the wall of names, understanding that heroism was built not on glory, but on loss. Reeves once joked, "You realize you've become a myth, right?" She smiled. Then maybe it's time myths reminded people that heroes bleed too. One crisp morning, 10 years after that day, Sarah returned to Afghanistan. The U.S. withdrawal had left much changed, but she had come for one reason, to visit the ridge. She found it easily, though the land had reclaimed most of it. The dunes had shifted, covering the scars of war. Only fragments remained: a rusted casing, a broken truck frame, a faded use flag half buried in sand. She stood there for a long while, the wind tugging at her jacket, the silence almost sacred. In her hand, she held something small, a single bullet casing, polished clean, with a name engraved on it, Ramirez. She knelt, buried it gently at the base of a stone, and whispered, "We finished it, brother." Then she straightened, saluted the empty horizon, and turned toward the waiting helicopter. As the chopper lifted off, she looked down one last time at the ridge. It was quiet now, peaceful. The same sun that had once burned through smoke now shone soft and golden. For the first time in years, she felt free. When they crossed back into the clouds, she closed her eyes and smiled. The world would keep telling her story, not as a tale of war, but as a testament to endurance, to the will of one person standing between death and her brothers in arms. Because in the end, legends don't fade. They become the light that guides those who come after. And somewhere, far from cities and metals, in the quiet dunes where it all began, the wind still whispered through the sand, the echo of gunfire long gone, the memory of a sniper who never missed, and the name of the woman who became the desert angel.